the information come from the so-called current population survey by the U.S. Census Bureau, working together with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. From this survey, you'll be placed into 3 groups or 3 categories. You could be employed, unemployed, or not in the labor force. Remember, if you are a full-time college student, you're a homemaker, you are serving in the military right now, you're in prison right now, you'll be put in this category. It's called not in the labor force. If you are in the labor force, you would be either employed or unemployed. In this category, employed, it includes paid employees. So for example, if you get paid by hourly wage, or if you are salaried, you work in your own business, or if you work for your family business, even as unpaid worker. So that means the bar is pretty low for you to be labeled as employed. So for example, if you work for parents for free, right? What you only get is a free accommodation and some free meal. Then you'll be considered employed. Of course, conditional on you are not a full-time college student. You'll be considered unemployed. In this category, unemployed, it includes those people who are not employed. First condition. Those people must be available for work. Second condition. Number 3, they must be trying very hard to find a job during the previous 4 weeks. So you can see the condition to be considered as unemployed is the bar actually is very high. You don't have a job, but you want a job, and you have been trying to get a job. So if you satisfy these 3 conditions, then the government will be put you in the unemployed category. Okay, so then comes some terms or phrases. What's the labor force? Labor force is just the number of people who are employed plus the number of people who are unemployed from the survey. Employed plus unemployed. Together, they form the so-called labor force. Keep in mind, labor force is smaller than total population. Unemployment rate is the percentage of labor force that is unemployed. Another statistic, labor force participation rate, that's the percentage of adult population that's in the labor force. Remember, people who are older than age 16 will be considered as an adult by the U.S. Census Bureau and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Okay, so for example, here, labor force, how to calculate labor force in a city. That's the number of employed plus the number of unemployed people. Labor force participation rate is a ratio. Whenever you see this word rate, right, that means a ratio, and usually is converted into a percentage. So labor force participation rate is equal to labor force divided by adult population. That means population 16 years and older. Unemployment rate, again, you see this word rate, right? That is a ratio and is usually converted into a percentage. So unemployment rate is equal to unemployed divided by labor force. For example, how many people, what's the current population size for Laredo, Texas? Let me Google Laredo, Texas, Wikipedia. If we can trust those numbers on Wikipedia, so what's the current population of Laredo, Texas? The city has about 235,000 people, right? That's the total population size based on 2010 data, 10 years ago. Okay, how many people are in the labor force? How many are employed? How many are unemployed in Laredo? We can find this type of information from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Where to find unemployment information? First, go to this homepage, right? You can simply Google BLS. click subjects, unemployment, right? Click state and local unemployment rates. Once you come to this page, let me scroll down. You see a map here, right? Regional resources. Let me select a state. Let me select Texas. Go. And let me check Laredo. Where's the Laredo? Here. And click retrieve data. I want to include the graphs. I only care about the past 5 years, from 2016 to 2020. Okay. From this spreadsheet of data, we have year, month. Notice labor force here, right? So this column, labor force. In November 2019, how many people are in the labor force? Roughly 118,000 people. Notice that how many people in the labor force are smaller than the total population size in Laredo. Why? Remember, labor force only includes people who are either employed or unemployed. There's another category called not in the labor force. Who are not in the labor force? Children, military personnel, people in prison, people who don't want a job, full-time students, stay-at-home mom and dad, homemakers, and retirees, right? So that is why labor force, how many people are in the labor force, are always smaller than the actual population size in that particular city. Okay, so labor force, right? Only within labor force, we have how many people are employed, how many people are unemployed. So for example, in January 2016, roughly 107,000 people in Laredo are employed, while over 5,000 people are unemployed. Okay, so just like GDP, unemployment involves a family of statistics, but not as many as GDP. So let's start with a very simple example. Okay, suppose we have a city. So for example, Ames, Iowa. The city has a population size of 51,000 people. And then we have some information about its demographic structure. 12% of the population are between 0 and 16 years old. 80% of the population are between 16 and 65 years old. And 80% of the population who are 65 years and older. And we have some more information. We know only people between 60 and 65 years old, they are in the labor market. That means they are in the labor force. That means this category, they are in the labor force. In addition, we know there are 1,800 people registered as unemployed in this city with 51,000 people. Okay, first question. We can calculate the so-called labor force participation rate. Remember, what's that formula? Labor force participation rate equals what? It is a ratio. So let me insert a mathematical formula here. Let me click insert. I need an equation. I want a ratio, so I'm going to recycle this formula. Labor force participation rate is equal to what? The numerator is so-called labor force. And what's the denominator? It's called adult population. What's adult population? 16 years and older. Right? Okay. How many people are in the labor force? From this is an example. 80% out of how many people? 51,000, right? So, again, again, I want a ratio. Let me recycle here. How many people? 51,000 people multiplies 80%, because only this group, they are in the labor force. And the denominator, adult population, right? How many people are in the adult population? To be in the adult population, you must be at least 16 years old. Here, 80% between 16 and 65, 8% older than 65, right? So we have 80% plus 8% out of 51,000 people. So the denominator will be, let me do it step by step. 80%, that means people between 16 and 65, plus 8%. That means people who are older than 65, right? Out of how many people? 51,000 total population. Multiplies 51,000. Okay, so if you are good at math, from this ratio we can see, we can simplify this ratio. 51,000 on top, 51,000 on bottom, right? So they cancel out. So we can simplify this ratio to what? Simply 80% divided by, what is 80% plus 8%? 88%. Right? And this is equal to what? 80 divided by 88. So what's the answer? Let me use a calculator. This is equal to 0.909. Again, whenever you see this word rate, right, we want to convert it into a percentage. So this is roughly equal to 91%. So that's a labor force participation rate for this city with a population size 51,000 people. And we have demographic structure. We know only people in this group, they are in the labor force, right? And also we know 1,800 people registered as unemployed. So for this city, the labor force participation rate is 91%. Another statistic we are interested in calculating is the so-called unemployment rate. For this city. So how many people are unemployed? We know that is 1,800 people. So remember, what's the formula for unemployment rate? Again, it is a ratio. Let me recycle this formula here. What's the on top? What's the numerator? That's how many people are unemployed. What's the denominator? Not the adult population. So unemployment rate is calculated by the number of people unemployed divided by labor force. How many people are in the labor force? That's the denominator. Equals, again, I'm going to recycle this ratio. How many people are unemployed? Do we know that number? Yes, 1,800 people, right? So here that will be 1,800. How many people are in the labor force? We know this number from our previous step. Here, you see, labor force, right? How many people are in the labor force? 51,000 people multiplies 80%. So I'm going to copy and paste this part. And this is equal to 1800 divided by what is 51,000 multiplies 80%. Let me use a calculator to figure this out. So this ratio becomes 1800 divided by 40,800. And this is equal to, let me use a calculator. This is approximately equal 0.044. And whenever we see this word rate, right, we want to convert it into a percentage. So this is equal to 4.4%. Okay, so the unemployment rate for this city, right, is equal to 4.4%. This is how unemployment rate is calculated. Remember, unemployment rate is equal to how many people are unemployed. Usually you'll be given this piece of information here. In this example, right, 18,000 people registered as unemployed. In reality, so for example, how many people are unemployed in Laredo? In January 2020, right, 4,915 people registered as unemployed in the city of Laredo. And we know labor force. In January 2020, right, this number of people are in the labor force. So unemployed divided by labor force. In January 2020, the unemployment rate in Laredo, Texas is equal to 4.1%. This is how unemployment rate is calculated.